I've got a story to share, something that happened a few years back. I was in my early 30s at the time, living in a quiet Scandinavian town. Back then, I had a habit of taking late-night walks. It felt safe enough, at least it used to. But over time, crime crept into the area. Mostly gang trouble. If you stayed out of their way, you usually had nothing to worry about. One night, close to midnight, I was out on one of those walks. Up ahead stood a tall apartment block I recognized. An old teacher of mine lived there. She'd be in her 50s now. What caught my attention, though, were two men circling the building. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I noticed the way they moved, standing on tiptoe, peering through windows, one of them even picking up a stick and pacing across the yard. That's when it hit me. They weren't just hanging around. They were looking for a way inside, and I had walked right into the middle of it. The two men stopped and turned. Their eyes locked onto me. I felt my stomach drop. Instinct told me to move, so I took the side path, hoping to avoid them. But it wasn't much better. It led past an empty schoolyard and an open stretch of grass. No cover, no people, just me. I glanced back. At first, they seemed to walk off in the other direction. Relief hit me for a second until I saw them again. They were waiting behind a bush, watching, silent. Still, that's when I knew for certain. They weren't just prowling the building. They were following me. My apartment was only a few blocks away, so I had to think fast. I slipped off my jacket, holding it up like a decoy, and walked briskly toward home. I didn't run. I didn't look panicked. I just kept moving. By some stroke of luck, nothing happened. They didn't chase me. But I know what would have happened if I'd kept walking straight, deeper into the dark streets. I would have been cornered. To this day, I still take the occasional night walk, but only for 10, maybe 15 minutes. And I always stick close to the buildings, where there are lights and witnesses. Because now I know, sometimes just being in the wrong place at the wrong time is all it takes. This happened about 5 years ago, when I was 15. It was the winter holidays, and I had invited 5 of my closest friends over for a sleepover. Their names were Kai, John, Nick, Robin, and Marcus. We had grown up together, and nights like this were our tradition. Since my parents were out of town, Robin's uncle Blake came by to watch over us. He was lighthearted and funny, but also tough. He trained fighters in mixed martial arts, so we all felt safe with him around. I also had my 2 bulldogs at home, adding to that sense of security. The weather outside was miserable, cold, heavy rain and thunder that shook the whole house. Blake ordered pizzas, and we settled in to watch a horror movie. Honestly, the storm made it the perfect setting. Halfway through the movie, the doorbell rang. Blake checked the peephole and saw the delivery guy. Something about him felt wrong. He was tall, with an unsettling grin that didn't fade. Blake handed him cash, grabbed the pizza, and quickly shut the door. He later admitted that the man gave him one of the creepiest feelings he'd ever had. We shrugged it off and ate. By midnight, the movie ended, and we all moved upstairs to the large guest room. Everyone rolled out their sleeping bags, while Nick and I took the bed. Blake stayed downstairs watching TV on the couch. The storm kept rumbling outside as we slowly drifted off. Sometime later, I felt a nudge. It was Nick, whispering, "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was thunder, but then came the sound again, soft knocking at the window. My chest tightened. We both stared at the glass. Suddenly, a figure appeared right up against it. A hood covered most of their face, but I could make out a crooked, twisted smile. My blood ran cold. I bolted out of bed and locked the window just as the figure tried to push it open. That's when I saw their teeth, white, uneven, stretched into a grin that didn't look human. I woke everyone up in a panic. The knocking turned violent. Whoever it was started shouting, but the words were garbled, nonsensical, like my brain couldn't process them. We ran downstairs to get Blake. He didn't waste a second. He grabbed my dogs and stormed outside. That's when we saw it. A ladder leaned against the side of the house, directly under our bedroom window. The figure had been climbing up, using the storm to cover his movements. Blake followed muddy footprints into the yard, and that's where we spotted him, crouched under a bush, trying to hide. Blake charged. The dogs lunged, barking and snapping, and Blake hit the man hard. We called the police. Because of the weather, it took them a while to arrive, but when they did, they arrested him. And here's the part that still chills me. The officers told us this man had done similar things before. Blake swore it was the same creepy pizza guy from earlier that night. Since then, I've never been able to shake it. My dogs now sleep in my room every night, and I don't think I'll ever forget that twisted smile pressed against the glass. Hi, my name is Becky. I'm from a small town in West Africa, and this is something that happened to me when I was just 6 years old, an experience I'll never forget. At the time, I lived with my parents in a modest apartment. It was a quiet building, and since there weren't many children my age around, I often felt lonely. To help out, my parents hired a babysitter to watch me whenever they were busy. One rainy afternoon, I asked my babysitter if I could play outside. She agreed, and together we went out into the yard. Right next to our building stood a small wooden house. That's where I noticed a group of children laughing and playing. They were a little older than me, and I quickly realized they were all siblings. Excited, I begged my babysitter to let me join them. She gave me permission, so I ran over happily. After a while, the oldest girl in the group announced that she had to cook. Curious, I asked if I could help. She smiled at me and said, "Of course, go collect some rocks. Small ones and big ones too." Without thinking twice, I gathered the stones. When I returned, she set up a large cooking pot over a fire, dropped the rocks inside, and covered it. Minutes passed. When she lifted the lid again, my heart nearly stopped. The pot, which moments earlier had been filled with nothing but stones, now contained steaming rice and meat, perfectly cooked. The smell was delicious, and my stomach rumbled. I was too young to understand what I was seeing, but I knew something wasn't right. It felt unnatural. The girl smiled again and invited me to sit with them. She offered me a plate of the food. For a moment, I almost accepted. I was hungry, I was curious, and I was only 6 years old. But before I could take a bite, my babysitter, who had been watching from a distance, ran over in a panic. She pulled me away, shouting, "Don't eat that." She didn't say a single word on the way back to our apartment. She just looked pale and frightened. I'm 16 now, but I still remember that day vividly. I still wonder what kind of power those children used, and what would have happened if I had eaten their food. Since then, I've never felt comfortable eating at strangers' houses. Because I know now, sometimes, not every meal is what it seems. And that thought still haunts me to this day.